Hi everyone, thank you for joining us for our Social Media Advanced webinar. We'll just give a few minutes to let everyone join and then we'll get started. Hi everyone who's just joining. We'll give it one more minute and then we'll get started with the webinar. It's just hit 12, so I think we'll get started and allow people to continue joining. But hi everyone, thank you for joining us for the social media and fundraising webinar for charities. This is an advanced session, and on the call today I have Sahil, the partnerships manager at the Big Give, and then also Teresa from Lightful, who will be holding the session. Just going to go over a few house rules before we get started. It's a simple presentation with a Q&A format, so please do use the chat function to introduce yourself and message throughout the webinar. You can set it to everyone so everyone can see your message. If you have any questions at any time, please use the Q&A function at the bottom tab of your Zoom panel, and you can send any questions there. If you do need a transcript throughout the webinar, there's a live transcript button as well that you can use, and that's enabled now if you need to use that. And just a reminder that this webinar is being recorded, so we'll have this recording available to watch after the webinar along with the webinar slides if you do want to go back and have a look at that. So then without further ado, I'll pass straight on to Teresa.
Thanks so much. So Beth and Sahil. Hello, everyone. So we're going to talk today about social media and fundraising, and more specifically, how to make the most of it for the Christmas challenge. So my name is Teresa Litcha. I'm the digital engagement manager at Lightful, and I've been working with nonprofits in terms of training the last 5 years around digital communications. And Lightful is a technology company providing digital skills for nonprofits. So we want to make sure we talk about social media and fundraising, and more specifically about the Christmas challenge, just to make sure that we explore different ideas on how to use different channels for the specific campaign. And of course, there are many opportunities on how you can use different channels. And the idea is to focus on building a community, of course, making sure you meet your objectives around fundraising, and of course, communicate your impact and tell stories about your organization and your beneficiaries and how you can make a difference. So before we start into the details on the planning and how to get organized, it would be great to hear from everyone joining if you ran a Christmas challenge campaign last year, just to get an idea of how many of you joined last year or any other years before. Perfect. We did 2020 and 2021. This is our first time. Yes, first time. Yes, we did. Nice. We have a really good mix. Some of you are starting for the first time, which is totally great. And many of you always see someone running for 4 years. Great. And it would be great, those of you who have joined in the past and have run campaigns, to also share your own tips throughout the session, just to make sure we help each other. Perfect. So let's start with planning and how to get organized. We have more than a month and a half for the start of the campaign. So we want to make sure this is the time that we get organized and we know that we get everything ready for the big day. So in terms of the first thing you need to consider is set your objectives. What do you want to achieve as part of your campaign? Before you start with the content, any other details, it's good to know what you want to achieve. So this could be about awareness. You might want to make your supporters find more about your work, your website, or stay up to date. It could be about engagement. So get your followers, for example, to promote your campaign, feel more involved, or activate your existing followers. And then, of course, something that's very important is about conversion when we're talking about fundraising, and turn your supporters into donors or encourage your existing donors to support you in another campaign. So when we're talking about objectives, you want to be specific so that it's able to measure the success afterwards and how you went. So there is an acronym called SMART objectives. So SMART stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. And it's a really easy way to get more organized with your objectives. So instead of saying, for example, I want to raise £5,000 in the Christmas Challenge campaign, you might want to be more specific. So you might want to say, I want to increase the amount raised in the Christmas Challenge by 10% compared to 2021. Or I want to attract 50 new donors by the end of December. So this makes it more specific. You have a timeline, you have a specific number, and then it makes it easier for you to keep track of what you want to achieve. And of course, even if you don't reach that goal, it's totally okay. It's more like an indication for you. The next step, once you set your objectives, you want to think of your audience. Who do you want to reach? And of course, the audience is not just one person or one specific demographic. There are many different audiences that you want to target, and this is also reflecting on different channels, and we'll talk more about that. So speaking of audience, we want to make sure that you include, of course, the supporters, but there's also the staff, the volunteers, could be the board or the trustees, there could be corporate partners, or even the social media newsletter followers who might not necessarily fit into the previous categories. And of course, there are the donors, and these could also be into smaller groups. They could be existing donors that might have lapsed and they're not engaged lately, or prospect donors who have been engaged with you, but they haven't really donated yet. So when we think of all the different audiences, we want to also think what's the best way to reach out to them. So for the supporters, for example, social media might be a great way to reach out, but you might also want to use your email communication or online communities. When it comes though to the board, the trustees, or even the corporate partners, then maybe LinkedIn is a great channel because it's more professionally focused. But then you might also think maybe some parts of the audience are not even on social media. So how can I still make sure that I connect with them? So you want to have a think and think like this audience to make sure that the content you create resonates with them. And then you want to think how different audiences are at different stages of the supporter journey. So someone might be in the awareness and they might know about your organization, but they don't know enough. And you want to make sure you move them a little bit further. Someone might be closer to the decision. So this is what we said, that they're about to become donors, but they're not there yet. So this is your work pretty much as part of the campaign. How can I encourage them to proceed to that donation by focusing on stories and creating great and effective content? Or someone might be at the last stage, as we mentioned, the advocates. So these are the ones who are engaged. And just because they're engaged or they're already donors, it doesn't mean that you don't want to create content for them. So you want to think, how can I make sure that all the content I create still fits as the different parts of the journey? And I still consider the different audiences in my campaign. So then we want to think, it's time to look at the channels. So how can all the channels support my campaign based on the different audiences and the different objectives? So you can use, for example, your website to raise awareness about your work, about the impact, provide more information or get them to sign up to newsletter updates. But you might, or you obviously want to use the big give page for a very clear goal. You want to get them to increase the donations. This is where they're going to go to donate. And then you also have social media or groups where you want to raise awareness, you focus on engagement, and you still use these channels to get your audience to participate in your campaign, and ideally to turn them into donations. So you want to think pretty much how can the different channels are reflected with the audiences I have in mind, and how can I use the right channels based on the key audiences I have in mind, the primary audiences that are important for me. And speaking of channels, since we're talking about social media, of course, we had to include an overview of all the main primary social media channels, not all of them, of course, but just to give you an idea on how you can use different channels. And obviously, Facebook is the most popular option for many years now. And it's a great channel if you want to tap into the personal element. So you want to reach, in that case, your friends, your network, but also their own network. So when someone from your team is posting on the Facebook page, this is a personal page. That means that they're targeting their own friends. So the idea is to go beyond your network. So by the time you post there, you're also extending your reach. And in terms of content ideas and how to be creative, videos work really well on Facebook. You can go live and experiment live streaming. You might want to create events that could also be virtual events, or you might also want to tap into the community and focus on Facebook groups. And it might even be a local element, just anything that makes sense for your organization. And except for the organic side of Facebook, obviously, there's the advertising side of things. And it is a great use if you have a budget and you want to run an advertising campaign on Facebook. But we really want to make clear here, coming from the Big Give team, that you can't add a pixel to your Big Give page. So pretty much the pixel is something you install on your website when you want to make sure that when you create a campaign and you want to use the audience again in the future to retarget them and run another campaign, this is pretty much what the pixel is. They're following the fact that they visited your website and they come back again if you want to use a campaign. So in that case, for the Big Give, because obviously it's not part of your website, you're not able to install the pixel, but you can still run campaigns. So you might want to run an awareness campaign or an engagement campaign, and you can boost your posts on Facebook and make sure that they really see the content, or you can lead them to your website and promote your work. And then there's the additional step of getting them into the Christmas challenge page. So as long as you consider that, the fact that you can get the retargeting for future use, it's still a great idea if you want to promote your campaign and of course you have budget to consider advertising on Facebook or other channels. Then we have Twitter, which obviously has the limitation of 280 characters, so it's very specific. You want to make sure that you create simple, clear, easy to understand posts. And the visual element, as always, is very important. So you might want to create GIFs, videos, images that are part of quotes, as the example that you can see in the screenshot. And Twitter is also great when you want to share live updates and small updates as part of the campaign. So you can use it, for example, when you're close to reach your goal, or when you need more content, when you want to keep the momentum going during the week. So anything you can still, that's a short update, Twitter is a great channel for that. Then we have LinkedIn, which, as we mentioned earlier, it's more of having a professional focus. And it's great if you want to focus on your board, your trustees, your partners, the corporate side of collaboration, and anyone you feel that would be great using the network. And that could still work well for your staff and your supporters, because they still use LinkedIn too, but it's just more thinking about the content. How can I make it more relevant about them? Or it could be about encouraging pledges on the corporate side of things in a professional focus, or activating your staff and your ambassadors and get them to share a specific post, send them the copy, and make it easier to promote your work. And in terms of the types of posts, images and videos work really well on LinkedIn, and especially the last year or so, they have really improved. And what also is great about LinkedIn is that you don't necessarily need to post too many posts during the week. So you can share 1 or 2 posts, and they can still show up on someone's feed for days after, which is not happening, for example, on Facebook or Twitter. And then we have Instagram, which is obviously another engaging option. And this is more about the community, and it could be great for the long-term wins. And it's all about storytelling. It is about the visual focus. Obviously, you need to include an image or a video when you're using Instagram. So you want to make sure that both the caption, the text you create, and the image really complement the narrative that you have in mind. And of course, you might want to explore more about videos and reels, which is longer videos. And you could also share stories, as we said about Twitter, to keep the momentum going, continue the engagement with your community, and try to think outside the box. It's not just about the post that you may have planned in advance. You might want to be a little more casual. You might want to highlight your human element and try to engage and feel closer to your supporters. And the example that I'm sharing here is really great in terms of a visual focus, because of course, it mentioned about the donation making the difference, but it really makes it clear with the before and after images. It's a really nice way to show the impact, how you can really help someone and encourage others to continue donating for your cause. And then we have TikTok, which is obviously still new, but it's a very engaging social channel, and it really has the numbers growing for all demographics. Obviously, it's more about tapping into a younger audience, although the numbers are changing, but it's still the majority. So 60% of users are into the Gen Z demographics. And what really makes it different is that the content is unique. And in order to start using it more, you need to have a better understanding of how it works, how TikTok is different from all the other channels. And it's more about being creative and maybe a little bit more fun, and not necessarily planning something that looks very professionally made. So feel free to use it if you want to feel that you want to try TikTok. And you definitely want to focus, as with every channel, build a community before making the ask. And if you haven't used TikTok up to now and you want to give it a try, you might feel that I want to experiment at the start. I want to give it a try. I want to start using it. And maybe I'm not necessarily making the ask, or I make it more about engagement for now and use it on a future campaign. So see, based on your own resources, time, and how much you want to spend the time you have on TikTok, and give it a try if you feel like this is the perfect time for you. And some more specific tips from RNLY, which they launched the TikTok account a few months ago, if I'm not wrong, and they went really well. And there were some really great tips from them. So the most important thing is to come up with a unique content plan. It's great if you want to just share a reel, for example, from Instagram to TikTok, but it's definitely better if you want to be more serious about TikTok at some point to think of a specific content plan. What do you want to share? By the time you launch, you need to have an idea on how to be more sustainable with your content from now on. So the content you create needs to be simple, but also searchable. How can others find more about you? How can you make sure that your content stands out? Or how can you encourage others to join your content through TikTok? And it's definitely about test and learn. Of course, it's still very early. There are not too many charities yet, but there are some great examples. And feel free to give it a try when you feel that you are ready and you also have the time to commit to that. And there are also some fundraising features you might want to consider even beyond the Christmas challenge. And you just need to make sure you sign up to three websites actually, to make sure that you connect the fundraising features on TikTok. So there's Tiltify, Benefit Causes, and Stripe, and you pretty much connect the fundraising stickers and everything you need to do on TikTok. So what we want to pretty much keep in mind in terms of social media is that social media is really about connecting your supporters, your donors with your cause. And it might not be always about direct donations, but you want to make sure that you really cultivate the relationships. It's about the long-term support, engagement, and of course, donations. So something that's useful when you create content for the social channels for Christmas challenge, it's about focusing on the messaging, on doubling the impact, and make them feel that there is a specific reason for your supporters to join the campaign right now at the specific time. And also good for the messaging is to encourage small donations or get new donors. So social media is really great about micro donations. You might not get the numbers that you get for offline donations or really old donors, but you can still get a really great audience, especially new donors, that might know about your work, but they might not have donated yet. So feel free to play with the messaging, experiment with the copy, or even the visual side of things, and find new ways to be more creative with your social channels and encourage them even with small donations that they're more than welcome. So now we talked about the social channels. It's time to prepare for the content now that we're getting ready for the campaign. So how can you prepare for the content? The first thing is to collect the stories and what you want to share. And the best way to get started is to look at your existing content. How can you repurpose any stories, any visual assets, anything that you have already that could be useful? So there could be existing quotes, stories from beneficiaries, from volunteers, or even images that you want to include in your campaign. And then start thinking, what's the new content that I want to create? How can I combine what I have with what I want to create? And once you start collecting them, it might be good to have them all in a folder or in a document if you create content, just to make sure that you're getting more organized. And in terms of creating the visuals, tools like Canva are obviously very useful because you don't need to be a designer or have design support. It's definitely good to create quick images that really help you feel part of the campaign on the visual aspect of things. Then once you organize the assets, it's time to plan your content. So you want to think of your social media posts and how they can all be connected. So you want to create the narrative and think how you can really tell a story through different posts or different channels. And what we talked in the beginning about the objectives, this is when you want to think, how can I link my content, everything I create right now, with the existing objective? Is it about awareness? Is it about engagement? Is it more specific about the fundraising element? How can I make sure that the actions lead to the objectives that I want to meet? And of course, planning is very important. And we've heard that from many charities on any campaign, and obviously the Big Give campaign too. It's very important to plan as much as possible and try to schedule, if you can, as many posts as possible. So you might not have everything scheduled, and it's always time to create more posts. But if you can have some sort of structure on what you want to share, then it's definitely really useful and you save time. So the next stage in terms of planning is about looking at your network and trying to understand, who do I follow? Who do I reach out in a part of the campaign? How can I make sure that I map out my existing network in order to encourage them to reach to their own networks? So obviously we have the staff, the volunteers, the board, the donors, and all of them make really different audiences and different channels, but we still want to make sure we help them as much as possible. So once we get an idea of those that we want to reach, it might be good to reach out before the campaign and trying to get them to help you as part of the promotion. So you might want to send them an email or include a document with all the details about the campaign. You might want to create a social media toolkit where it's pretty much having all the assets and the copy in one place, and really encourage them to be involved, but help them as much as possible. Don't get them to spend too much time, and make it really easy for them to join the campaign. And if you want to go beyond your network and experiment with influencers, there are obviously many tools, or if you want to just do the manual research on your own on the channels, there is a tool called FollowerWonk, which is a limited free version, but if you want to have a quick look on something specific, it can still be useful. Or there are obviously many paid options, and that goes into a bigger budget. One of them is BuzzStream, but there are many out there. And that depends really on what you want to do as part of this campaign or any other campaigns. So then you have the content, you know your network, you have the objectives, it's time to prepare for the launch of the campaign. So it's a good idea to change your social media cover photos, keep that everything about the campaign, and make the launch the first day all about having a big bang pretty much, and make sure that everyone knows about your campaign. If you want to encourage your network to support you, this is the time. The first day is probably the best time for them to support you. And you might also want to send them reminders the day before that the big day is coming. Feel free to support me, and make it really easy for everyone to be part of the campaign. So if they're ready to donate, of course, that's ideal. But if they're not ready yet, still encourage them to support your campaign and spread the word. So pretty much what we discussed in terms of getting organized, there are 5 steps. You start by creating the theme. Think of what you want to talk about. Think of the hashtag. How can you make sure that you have a clear idea of what you want to talk about? Start collecting the stories. There might be existing stories, or there might be content that you want to create. Start with the planning. So think how you want to schedule some posts in advance, or what you want to do on the day. Continue with the outreach, which is very important, of course. Reach out to your network and make sure you have as many involved as possible. And then, of course, there's the launch of a campaign where the scheduled part is probably done, but then you're focusing on being more specific on the engagement. And now it's pretty much the time that you've launched the campaign, and you want to make sure you jump into the next steps on what you need to do. So once the posts are already scheduled, what you need to focus on is the engagement and monitoring of the campaign. So it's definitely a good idea to dedicate some time to engage with your supporters. As the posts go live, you might get mentions, comments, or anyone else might want to be involved. So keep an eye on your social channels or all your digital channels. Try to be social. Try to thank those who are sending comments, who are supporting your campaign, and make them feel appreciated. Make them feel that they're also part of the campaign. And that's why you need to dedicate some time on the engagement. And when the donations are starting to kick in, you want to keep the momentum going. As we mentioned, you might want to use Twitter or Instagram or any other channel to keep the momentum going and share updates. So you might want to say, we're halfway where, let's continue. We have this number of days left. And these kind of posts work really well because they give a timeline to your supporters. And it makes it easy to remember that the campaign is running at a specific timeline. And something that's also useful in terms of engagement and protecting your community, make sure that you have a policy in place for how to address negative comments, trolls, or any other posts that might not be ideal for your community. So it doesn't have to be something that takes too much time. And there are several examples online that you can have a look. It's more about making sure if you're working with more than one person in your team and the social side of things, that you know how to address a specific comment, a specific type of post, or a question that you might hear more often, to be more organized and have a set number of answers to address that. So it's obviously all about protecting your community and make sure that it doesn't go into a negative situation when you're not really sure how to address that. And that could also affect your organization's impact. So some example in terms of the tools on how you want to address engagement and monitoring, there is TweetDeck for Twitter, which is free. And if you want to only focus on Twitter, it's a great tool to use. And of course, on the paid side of things, there are many tools that focus on scheduling, engagement, or even monitoring. So Sprout Social is about scheduling, but also engagement. Brand24, it's more about the monitoring side of things for your brand and all the mentions that you receive. And that, of course, depends on your budget and how you want to use it on more specific tools. So something that's also really useful, and that's good during the campaign, is to think of the experimentation and what you want to do about this. So A/B testing is pretty much when you compare two different things, and it works great when you focus on one thing at a time that you want to experiment. So you might want to share two posts, let's say on Facebook, and the copy is similar but not the same, but you use the same photo. So when the photo is the same and the copy changes, you can use the example to have a look and see which one works better. And that's something that's also happening a lot with advertising, because you can launch two ads at the same time, change the image, keep the copy the same, and just see what works best. So the more you A/B test on different campaigns, the easier it becomes to understand your audience and what works on a specific channel. So don't be afraid to give it a try and make sure you capture the learnings, just to make sure that you know what works in the end. And something that's also useful, of course, during the campaign and later on, is keep an eye on your content. That's because you schedule the posts doesn't mean that you can adjust the timelines or you can delete something that doesn't feel relevant. So for example, you might have scheduled a post on the third day that says we're halfway there and we want your support, but you actually realize that you're not halfway there and you need to adjust that. So it's always important, if anything happens, that you keep an eye on your schedule and you're trying to be both proactive and reactive. So if something changes, you need to be quick and make sure you adjust your schedule. And of course, always learning from your success and everything that happens at the same time, and try to replicate what goes well. You might schedule a post on the first day that has really big success. So you might want to schedule something similar for the fourth or fifth day and just adjust the copy or change the image. So always keep an eye on what goes out and see what you can really learn from this. And now we assume we're done with the campaign and hopefully everyone had a successful campaign. So you want to think what's coming up next. So after the campaign, it's really, really important to thank your donors and your supporters, make them feel that they were really part of the campaign. And it's very common to see posts on the day after or a few days after with charities thanking the supporters, sharing an update, how much you raised, how are you going to use the funds, or really create a copy that really is about highlighting your impact. And that's always going really well with your supporters and your donors. And you make them feel that any contribution is really valued. So it's definitely a good idea. And we've seen many examples of charities spending more time to thank their supporters individually, especially those with the bigger donations, and make sure that you might send them an email afterwards or an update and make them feel that they really appreciate it. And of course, at the end of the campaign, you also want to look at the measurement and see how you went, especially comparing with the objectives that you've set. And when it comes to measurement, of course, there are many different ways to look at it and spend time. So you can either spend half an hour or endless hours in measurement, depending on how you want to approach that. So the measurement, it's better to focus on the objectives that you've set and try to be more specific. So if you focused on the objective being about awareness, then you might want to look more about the reach and the traffic. So this is about your follower growth, the people that you've reached, the links that you had, the clicks to your website. That, of course, it is about the donations, and we can't forget the number of donations. So it could be about the traffic to your donation page on your website beyond the Big Give page. It could be about donations from social media and clicks. Again, when it comes to the Big Give campaign, it's more specific. Or you could track the number of new donors that you acquired compared to previous campaigns. And of course, engagement on social media is always important, whether it's about likes, comments, shares, any reactions, any mentions compared to the past, and what you can really learn from all the different metrics. So the learnings could be anything. It could be if you're running the campaign for the first time, it's about understanding what worked well, what you need to improve. And of course, if you're still running the campaign for several years now, you want to understand, what do I need to change in my next attempt? What worked better this year compared to the previous ones? Or were there any unexpected wins, any channels that worked better than the previous years? Or any specific images, videos, types of content that really worked well? So this is definitely something to spend some time on, and it doesn't necessarily have to be the day after. It could be the week after, or even the month after. And have a think of what you want to continue doing, what you need to stop because it probably is not working, and what do you need to start if you haven't tried that yet. It's definitely a good exercise, and it works really well because you map out all the learnings the time you still remember them, and it's easier for the next campaign in the future. And this is just an example from a Big Give campaign on the Christmas challenge. And of course, there are so many out there, but I really like the fact from PANDAS UK, they had this target that was relatively small and very specific. So they wanted to raise 9,000, a little bit more than £9,000. And what was great is that they actually raised more than £20,000. And what was interesting is that 74% of the supporters were new donors. So that's always a really good idea, especially with the Christmas challenge, to look at the number of donors who are new and how you make sure you engage with them and you turn them into long-term donors. So this is about, again, using social media to cultivate the relationship, explore the channels that work best for you. And you might also go beyond that and explore the difference between online and offline donations, how you can still engage them all, and how to make sure that they stay up to date, get them to sign up to your newsletter, stay on track, visit your website, follow you on social channels, and keep them interested for your next campaign. So it's not just a one-off donation. And in terms of the tips on what worked well for them, they mentioned about the idea of champion founding. So pretty much working with their champions to make sure that they really have the support for their network to spread the word about the campaign. They talked about pre-planned posts, which is pretty much what we mentioned, the idea of scheduling posts in advance to make sure that you do save time during the campaign, and you just keep an eye on what works and what you need to improve in the campaign. And of course, something that's always important, trying to secure pledges. And this is the outreach, again, that you might want to explore, and how to make sure that you do have the support on that end. And that's pretty much on my end. And of course, I'd love to hear more from all of you who have run campaigns in the past on what worked well, what you need to improve. And also those who are planning the first campaign, any questions, anything I can help, feel free to share at the chat.
Thanks, Teresa. Really good presentation and some really helpful information in there. We did have a question from Melissa, and she says, is there any value in sharing the campaign page with supporters before it goes live? For example, asking supporters, donors, trustees to add the campaign page to their favorites or to bookmark the page, for example.
Yeah, that's actually a really good idea. Of course, if you communicate in a way to understand that they don't necessarily need, they can donate at the time, but if you want to add it to your favorites or keep it saved, send a reminder to yourself, then it's definitely a good idea. So it might be better for sending emails and having direct communication. You don't necessarily want to share the link, let's say, on your social channels. But yeah, the idea of saving it and getting a reminder is really great.
And do you have any tips or advice on how to reach out to social media influencers potentially to encourage them to also get involved in the campaign?
Yeah. So that's pretty much the idea why we mentioned the tools that you might want to explore on any influencers that are relevant to your organization. But what is definitely useful to consider is that if you approach them now and you have no affinity with them, chances are it's probably late. But you might want to explore the process of an influencer strategy on how to start approaching them in general and build a connection, or look at influencers who are not necessarily very big in terms of being celebrities, which makes it harder. It makes a longer process with involving different people to work with them. But you might look at someone who is closer to your community. They might have 5,000 followers and they're still very engaging. So sometimes it's a little bit more manual work, but you want to find the one who has some sort of connection with your organization. They might have shared something in the past, or try to make it a little bit more personal to them, and then send a really nice message and say that I see that you have a connection with my organization. I would love to get your support. And of course, it doesn't work every single time, or not in many times. It takes time, but it can get really well as a relationship for the future.
Great. And we have a question from Claire here. It says, thanks, Teresa, really useful webinar. Will the Big Give, actually, I think this is more towards us, Sahil, but will the Big Give be able to provide analytics of how people arrive at our Big Give challenge page?
Unfortunately, we are not able to share analytics on sort of individual campaign pages about where people have come from. So if you do want to track that sort of information, then as Teresa said in the presentation, we would advise creating like a landing page on your own website and then link it to your Big Give campaign page. Obviously, that's not super accurate. They'll still provide you with some insights into what channels people are arriving at your campaign page from.
And I think in general, we do just some general analytics of our main Christmas challenge page. I think we find the majority come from email and then social is after. Is that right, Sahil? So
yeah, that's correct. Yeah, email is definitely the biggest driver of people visiting the site.
Sahil, did you have any questions you wanted to pick out?
Yeah, so I think we actually answered the next question from Josie. Do you know what? We can have a look into so Josie's asked what's the average percentage of income that's driven by social media as opposed to email and website, and what's the big target for this? We can have a look into this and get back to you, Josie. So if you can pop us an email, and then we can maybe even write a blog post about that, or signpost it somewhere. So please do get in touch with us and we can give you some more information on that. The next question is from Erica, who says the new logo. So we have a new rebranding of the Big Give and the Christmas Challenge logo. She says the new logo is a bit confusing. Can you show me an example of the new logo you've been using in a post? I will leave that one with Beth, as she is our sort of marketing comms.
Yeah, no worries. So of course, those you haven't known, Big Give has gone through rebranding this year, which is why you haven't seen the reef logos that we've used in the past. We've got the new triangle logos now. All of the assets for this year's Christmas Challenge are available in your Christmas Challenge portal. So if you log into the portal, go to the support section, and under the Christmas Challenge tab, you'll see all of our assets. And there's some examples from Canva there, some Canva templates which you can use, and that will show you a little bit more about how the logo is being used in action, particularly for social media posts. And you can use that as a template to planning your posts as well.
I think we'll probably add there is that we're going to be sort of relaunching the website with a new sort of design. So the new logo and the new sort of designs that we share in those Canva templates will sort of fit in with how the new website will look.
Have a question from Eleanor, I want to say, but please forgive me if I've completely butchered that. We have been exploring the Big Give dashboard, and you've seen great examples of templates, graphics that we could use. Oh wait, we kind of just answered this one, but yeah, again, Eleanor, if you can, Eleanor, forgive me, you can use those graphics if you want to, but they're definitely just a starting point. You don't have to use those if you want, or you can just use the Big Give logo and do your own designs. Again, it's completely up to you.
There's a question from Melissa. Would you advise using tiny URL or bit.ly to shorten the campaign page URL in situations / formats where you can't create a link button or link text. So maybe that's one for Teresa. Do you have any advice there about using Bitly or TinyURL?
Yeah, the good thing with TinyURL or Bitly or things like that is that it's making it easier for you to track pretty much the number of clicks later. And of course, it makes it easier visually to not have a very long link and make it very simple and easy for someone to see. And yes, if you go, for example, afterwards on the page on these sites, you can check the number of clicks or the sources, which is obviously making it easier for you to understand where the clicks come from.
Great. Yeah, and I think you can sign up for an account with them, and then you can even do a bit of customization of what the URL is. I think, there's a question for Beth as well from Claire. Is the Big Give doing a similar promo video to last year with all the great celebrities? She said it was super useful.
Yep, we're currently in progress with the video and reaching out to people. So the short answer is yes, we're going to have a video up, and we will notify you all when that's available, so you can also use it in your own comms.
We'll probably launch the video. Normally it's about 2 weeks before the campaign launches, roughly around that time scale.
Question for Teresa. What is the best thing to measure when you're looking at your social media analytics? So for example, could it be engagement, impressions, reach, and so on?
So I think it's a combination between engagement and reach, pretty much. The reach helps you understand how many people saw your post, and this could be your network, could be expanded. And of course, engagement is important because it's one thing for someone to see your post, but you also want to make sure they engage with it, which means that this is a really good sign for you that they are interested in what they see. And of course, it is linked to fundraising. It's very important to go beyond the analytics that are about social media and try to understand if it's about visiting your website or the number of donations you had in total, and try to link that again with your objectives. What do you want to get out of social media?
There's a question here as well, do you have any advice on budgeting for Facebook or IG paid ads versus paying to boost some direct posts? So should they be budgeting to boost some Facebook IG posts in the run up to the campaign week, or can it be happening their own organic posts in future if they've already paid to boost some posts?
So in terms of the budget, obviously it depends to your organization's resources, but the good thing with Facebook is that you don't necessarily need a really big budget. So it's very cost effective, and in the specific campaign, because obviously you can add the pixel, as we mentioned, to the landing page, you can still use the advertising or the boosting of the posts right before the campaign, a few days before or when the campaign is live, to make sure that more people see your posts. So you can boost your existing posts. You can create a campaign that gets into your website so that they find out more and then they click on another step to donate. And the budget, for example, I've heard even cases of charities, like really small charities, using even like £50 or £100. So you can still get some results without necessarily a very big budget. And you can also get an idea on Facebook when you're about to create a campaign. You get an estimate on what you can get on a specific number. So with £50, you can get like 30 engagements and 40 clicks. So you get an idea of what you want to get with the budget that you have.
Great. I think there's a question as well from Eunice. Are we able to contact a pledger, even although we don't actually know them, but can the Big Give connect us so we can ask if they can help support regarding promoting our campaign? If you're talking about your own pledges for your campaign, that's something we don't do. So we leave it charities to manage those relationships. We don't contact pledges on behalf of charities. If you're referring to any champions that may have supported your campaign, we will be letting charities that have secured champion funding, will be contacting them in the next few days with details about their champions' contact preferences. So if they have opted into receiving comms from you, you can contact them, but we would generally advise it more for campaign purposes, and we leave the champions more to manage how they want to promote the campaign or promote charities if they want to. So we really generally advise if you are contacting champions where they want to hear from you, is just to more keep on a sort of thanking purposes rather than pushing them to sort of being sharing specific campaigns. You can develop that relationship by when you first reach out to them.
One question here, would you recommend changing the messaging when posting on different channels, for example, when posting on Twitter compared to Facebook, or are the audiences very similar, so it's worth just to keep the same?
So obviously you want to make sure that you save time. We know that it's not easy to adjust the messaging for every single channel, but when it's something that is very different, as we mentioned about the audiences earlier, so for example, Instagram and LinkedIn are very different channels and they're different audiences. So what you're sharing on LinkedIn might not necessarily make sense in the same tone of voice or messaging on Instagram. So you want to think, how can I create some sort of like draft post and then adjust it a little bit just to make sense? You don't need to create content from scratch, but just to review that and think of the audience that you want to share that, if there's anything you need to adjust.
Sahil, was there any other questions you wanted to ask?
I think that is it. I can't see any other questions. I think anything else has come in. So I think, yeah, I'll do you Beth to wrap up.
Cool. And thank you all for joining us today. And a big thank you for Teresa for holding these really insightful sessions. I just wanted to add that we do have a Facebook group now available for charities to ask any other charities, any questions that you have, particularly if you want to just ask about advice or experience or just connect with other charities. I'll try to link the page in the chat now, but yeah, feel free to add to join that and use that to connect with other people. But otherwise, I've just linked it there. But otherwise, yeah, thank you all for joining us. Hope to see you for the next session, and yeah, have a good afternoon.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.